Good morning, Don't Unfriend Me Nation. Matthew Spear from the Don't Unfriend Me Show. We are going to dive into Afghanistan. Gold Star parents had a chance to express their feelings towards Joe Biden and his absolute failure and dropping the ball of the EXFIL from Afghanistan. We need to talk about it. Why it's almost been 2 years next week. It can't be forgotten. Yes, it's important to focus on inflation and interest rates and housing prices and basic commodities and food and gas and where we are from energy independence, fentanyl coming over the border, illegal immigration. We can talk about the valuation of the dollar. We can talk about the instability of OPEC. We can talk about Russia. We can talk about China. We can talk about Iran, how Africa is going to be the next breeding ground for grabbing as much land and influence as possible, similar to Turkey and Cuba during the Cold War or the Middle East during the Persian Gulf. Folks, all of these things are important. All of these things need to be addressed, but we can't forget the absolute brazen and lack of accountability from Joe Biden and his administration when it came to the botched EXFIL from Afghanistan. My name is Matthew Spear. I'm the host of Don't Unfriend Me. That's what we're going to be covering this morning, and I hope you stay with me. I want to show you a video first. I've spent hundreds of hours with Gold Star families, whether we are putting a roof over their head or giving them a wooden American flag. I've held them in my arms as they've cried, and there is just a sense of longing that is impossible and immeasurable to fill inside their souls and hearts. And although you can say all the kind words and all the condolences that you can muster, none of it will ever replace the loss of that child. That Gold Star is simply indicative of the emptiness that they have, and no amount of light can fill that. Losing a child is horrific. You think Joe Biden would understand that, considering that he claims that his child has lost their lives overseas in a war and conflict, which wasn't true, but he has lost a child, which you would think would be able to correlate between what these families have felt over the last 2 years. But little or nothing has been done to at least try to assist and give them the answers of why. Why were these decisions made? Instead, you have Joe Biden, who stands up there with a coy grin and a smile as 13 lives were lost and over 200 civilians from the Afghan nation were lost as well. Let's go into this quick video, and then we can talk about some of the things that I still take umbrage with when it comes to Joe Biden and the withdrawal from Afghanistan. This is Kelly Barnett, mother of Staff Sergeant Taylor Hoover, to be specific. You'll also hear from a Marine Corps father. There were a total of 13 American service members who lost their lives. Here is her testimony.
Lack of leadership. He said he'd never seen anything like it.
Kelly Barnett says her son, Staff Sergeant Taylor Hoover, described the situation at Kabul's Hamid Karzai International Airport 2 years ago as chaotic. She says he thought military leaders were reckless with the operation.
He told me, Mom, I now know that the command cares nothing for us. My son, 12 others left this earth thinking that their command cared nothing for them.
Barnett and other family members of the 13 service members killed in the August 26, 2021 bombing spoke at a forum Monday in Escondido. Representative Darrell Issa says he organized the forum to draw attention to the failures of the U.S. withdrawal from Afghanistan after 20 years of war.
Today is about the members of the Army, the Navy, Marine Corps, who deployed in wet in harm's way, many of them at the last minute, to help with the evacuation.
Many family members say President Joe Biden, his defense secretary, and Secretary of State have dodged accountability in the withdrawal as the Taliban seized control of the country. Steve Nakui's son, Lance Corporal Kareem Nakui, died in the bombing. He says the president failed his son and all those killed.
My son needed a commander-in-chief who cared solely about his life.
According to a Pentagon after-action report released in February, Biden administration officials were indecisive and failed to react as the Taliban gained ground that summer. A similar report from the State Department in June said both the Trump and Biden administrations failed to plan for worst-case scenarios ahead of the withdrawal. Almost 200 Afghan civilians were also killed in the bombing. Andrew Dyer, KPBS News.
And obviously those testimonies and the actual findings from the investigation were all swept under the rug because only thing that people care about are the current stories that draw attention away from what's really important. And this is one of those things. Joe Biden can sit here and pretend all he wants. He can sit here and say that he didn't have any understanding, that he had no idea what was happening. But we all know that that's not true. You can start with the U.S. weapons that were left over in Taliban hands, which is an incredible number. And if we sit here and pretend that Syria was anything like this, well, at least those leaders did the slash and burn focus, which was to destroy these weapon systems so they were no longer usable by the enemy. But you're talking 600,000 weapons were left, 76,000 vehicles, 160,000 pieces of intel and surveillance equipment and reconnaissance equipment. And these are biometric data that allows them to find the NGOs that are still in country who helped the United States for 21 some odd years. It's signing a death warrant for these people. 163,000 radios, 208 aircraft, 30,000 items for detecting and disposing of explosives, all of these things, as far as the millions and millions of rounds of ammunition left. None of this is okay. We were told that they were inoperable, but as we saw Blackhawks go up into the air and subsequently come down just a few seconds later because of the Taliban pilots who have no experience and ultimately are trying to fly something with a Radio Shack manual. We can talk about a year before where Afghan regular army were surrendering their positions to hardly any resistance whatsoever from Taliban forces, surrendering to the other stand countries in the northern and southern areas of Afghanistan. These were all signs and indicators that they were going to lay down their weapons, that they were not going to fight with the Taliban, since a lot of them either were threatened by the Taliban, were afraid of the Taliban, or had been members of the Taliban at one point or another. We can talk about the quid pro quo as Joe Biden got on the phone and started trading ponies in regards to saying, if you don't do this, we're not going to provide air support, or we're not going to provide intel, instructing the Afghan president that you will do this way, and if you don't, there will be no aid from the United States. It certainly sounds familiar, almost like a phone call supposedly that Donald Trump was accused of with Ukraine. But I guess quid pro quo only goes one way, especially if you're a Republican. It's interesting that Bagram Air Base, 30 days before, a key strategic position in Afghanistan, not just for ensuring that the Middle East had stabilized quick ready response teams in the area, but it also was a key detractor for China to move into Afghanistan or bring any military personnel there. It was a key spot for the United States' interests. It was also very well defended. This air base was tucked back from Kabul airport, which had seen hundreds of terrorist attacks over the years that we were there inside Afghanistan, and made a horrible EXFIL spot. Anybody will tell you that who's ran operational security. More importantly, bringing in hastily American soldiers, servicemen and women, and putting them in harm's way, and having security ran by the Taliban, which doesn't make much sense considering they're a terrorist organization. Isn't that what we've said all these years, and the reason why we are there hunting in Afghanistan is because of the Taliban? Or all of a sudden they had a change of heart, but none of those things were actually indicative of the truth. Women were still subjected to being under the boot of men, caned or stoned or acid thrown on their face if they simply spoke out against their husbands. School teachers and school children being pulled out of school based upon what they were taught. Not having the ability to drive or vote or have any dignity remaining. I mean, these are the credos that we've heard from groups like ISIS and Al-Qaeda and the Taliban for decades. Pulling out of Bagram Air Base and surrendering it in a state of disarray and allowing forces that obviously were going to subvert authority in the Afghani leadership structure is unacceptable. More importantly, the accountability from Joe Biden is non-existent. He has constantly stood up on the stage and shoveled it off to Donald Trump or saying it was his fault. Don't you remember the office of the president-elect, how Joe Biden said that he wanted to start 90 days early once the election took place and wanted to get in there and really set his first 100 days? Well, this was the looming issue. This was the 800-pound gorilla in the room, and Joe Biden didn't focus on that. Instead, he decided to project and decide how many times he was going to write executive orders or deregulate by putting regulation all over Barack Obama's old policies that Donald Trump had wiped away. It's interesting that Joe Biden doesn't take responsibility, considering that all the intelligence apparatuses around him told him that these things were happening, yet he denied it. But when Donald Trump denied intelligence apparatuses and everything that they presented to him, he was considered a traitor and treasonous and a slave to Putin. The hypocrisy is so thick that you can brush it away from your face. The whole point is this. It's not about the inner politics. It's not about the geopolitics. It's not about the overall wasting of American lives for 21 years and telling every American serviceman and woman that what they did was absolutely a waste of time. Yes, those things are important. Yes, they matter. But truly, it's once again people wasting the lives of veteran brothers and sisters in this country, taking them and putting them in harm's way for no reason other than to do what exactly? Save political face? Score some cheap political points? Well, I am under the understanding that American lives are more important than that. And although politicians have thrown them to the walls and against the brigade multiple times and wasted them for no reason, it doesn't make it any less palatable. It doesn't make it any less painful. And for those Gold Star families and parents who constantly hold hands draped in white as they hold their heads down in prayer for those people that they lost, maybe Joe Biden could take one moment and answer and atone for what he has done, which is once again made a horrible decision that hurts America. Folks, thanks for watching the show tonight. You can do me a favor. Stop by the Don't Unfriend Me show. Pick up some shirts, some hats, some coffee mugs, whatever you want over at thedumshow.com. 10% goes back to veterans, which is important to me. And as always, we'll be on live 8 o'clock tonight with a new show with Olivia and I. Leroy and Amy are taking a little bit of a break. They've got a bunch of stuff going on, but my wife and I will be there. Would love to talk to you and tell me your thoughts down below. Do me one last favor. Please listen to this message. It's extremely important. The Veteran Crisis Hotline. I end the show this way in regards to the Veteran Crisis Hotline. You can dial 988 for help on your phone, or you can go to my page, and on the top of that, click VCL, and you'll be connected directly to the Veteran Crisis Hotline. Stumbles and all, glad we got through that part. I will see you tonight.
I'm David Boreanaz with the Cast of SEAL team, and we have an important message for returning vets.
We want you to know if you're struggling to cope, there's help and it's just a phone call away.
The Veterans Crisis Line is staffed with experienced professionals who know your struggles.
There's no greater sacrifice in service to our country. We're able to enjoy our freedoms because of it.
Your service is important, you are important.
For vets and their families, the Veterans Crisis Line is here to help 24 hours a day. Please call